You're going to think of a question. I'm going to speak about a topic for the next 10, 15 minutes, and then if you have a question, bring up your empty question. Fair enough? Can you think of something? Okay. So, what I wanted to speak about is kind of a continuation of where we were last week. Last week we spoke about the issue of the issue of Rabbi Natan Slifkin, and the issue of whether one can argue on one can determine if Chazal were wrong about something or not. So somebody asked me today on my blog, what's the difference between doing CPR and such like on a person whose heart has stopped, which we say you can do, and I mentioned this last week, the assumption that a woman would rather be married than single, where we say we can't change that assumption. We say we can change the assumption about a person who's clinically dead and say, well, CPR might work, we do it even on Shabbos. We say we don't change the assumption when it comes to somebody, a married woman, we assume she still would rather be married than unmarried, even though her marriage is not a happy one. So, the difference is like as follows. In the case of the person whose heart has stopped, their Chazal were using physiological and technological standards. Physiological, that the body was dead. Technological, there was no way to bring him back. So if the physiology changes, which it really hasn't, or the technology changes, which it has, then of course we go back and we say, well, they were using their physiology and their technology. We now have progressed. Science has invented ways to push back the irretrievable moments of death. So therefore, of course, it's going to be Mechal Shabbos for this person. When it comes to psychology, though, and this might even be a spiritual thing about a woman that should rather be married than single, we think it's different nowadays. And I certainly think it's different nowadays, but I don't know how Chazal determined it to be able to overturn it. I don't know if they did interviews, if they had a revelation from heaven, if they had psychological insights. I don't know how they determined it. So therefore, much as I would like to overturn, I can't overturn it. I can't overturn something where I don't have the same tools available to me, which they used initially to make the halacha. Is that clear? Now, another aspect of this, which is very fundamental. And today I met somebody in Wesley Kosher, a friend of mine, and I said to him, what do you think about my ongoing, debate with Rabbi Slifkin et al.? So he said to me, and I'm not sure if he was on my side or not on my side, but what he said to me was that they're missing a basic psychological insight into my way of thinking. My way of thinking is that you don't say about Chazal that they're wrong unless you're up against the wall and there's no other alternative. Now, the reason why I say this is because I believe that when it says in Chazal that Eliyahu Navi appeared to them, it's true. I believe when it says in Chazal that the Malach HaMoves, the angel of death, had a nice conversation with a couple of Tanoim Amoraim, it's true. I believe that when it says that they went up to Shemayim to ask questions in heaven of Malachim or of the departed Tzadikim, whoever else, it's true. So therefore, my belief is that Chazal had a special pipeline to heaven, and that therefore heaven would not just let them make a gross mistake and fundamental error if it's something tremendously significant in halacha. Either in heaven they would correct them, or they'd say, you know what, fine, they determine this, that's okay. It's not so outlandish that it can't stand. It might not be 100% accurate, but that doesn't matter. So therefore, they're not going to send a note from Shamayim down that this is inappropriate way to pass it. So therefore, this is also underlies my understanding of why the Rambam said, not what the Rambam says, but of what the Rambam says. The Rambam says, why is the authority of Tanakh, why is Talmud Bavli authoritative. And one cannot go back and argue on the sages of Talmud Bavli, because all of Am Yisrael universally accepted the Talmud Bavli upon themselves as the standard of halacha. So again, my perspective is that it's not they accept it upon themselves arbitrarily, but they say, hey, this is a good book, let's take this and use this as a basis for our laws. Rather, because of Chazal's Kedusha, which they perceive, because of Chazal's high level of Siyata Dishmaya, of a divine assistance they perceive, because of Chazal's high level of wisdom, they accepted it. There were causes, reasons. It wasn't a random choice. Now, Chazal go even a step further. Gemara Bava Basra says, Chacham adif minavi. A wise man is superior to a prophet. And Ramban says because he knows the truth with the ruach, I don't forget it says ruach of Kodesh or the ruach of Torah, the spirit which is within himself. So a great Chacham has very great insight, perception, perhaps even ruach HaKodesh to understand something. Now these very great Chachamim, they might not have existed for many years already. They might be extinct. They might last to walk the face of the earth at the time of Ravina Ravashi. But these are the type of Chachamim who were the ones who wrote the Talmud Bavli. Now that's important because certain things today strike us as inappropriate, even though they're backed by great Torah scholars. For example, this is which I posted on my blog today. There's this absurd advertising for tzedakah campaigns, which goes on nowadays, right? Places like Kupat Ha'ir in Israel, which promise you tremendous salvation for giving them a few dollars, and there is this rivalry between the organizations to have gedolim daven for you, to have special rituals conducted on your behalf, whatever it is. So all of this is, at the very least, strange, because it's how can anybody guarantee these things? That you're going to, if you give them money, you're going to have Yeshua, salvation, no matter what the sum is. And how can anybody, if that was the case, then all the people who are getting money from these places should just give money back, and they'll have a salvation too, right? It's not my point. Somebody else made this point. So the question is, though, we have many Gedolei Torah who are signed on to these very tzedakahs, prominent pictures, prominent signatures, etc., etc. So how do we deal with this? So the answer is that Gedolei Torah nowadays do not necessarily have this divine inspiration which once was prevalent. They are much smarter, perhaps, and wiser, and can give far greater sage advice than most people, but they don't have Ruach HaKodesh. We're not talking about Tanam and Amorim. We're not talking about Rishonim. We're not even talking about the early Achronim. And we have to realize that there are levels. And the further back you go, the holier you get. So therefore, today, it would be, I think, not so difficult to deceive, hoodwink, to take advantage of a gadol and portray something as what it really is not. And this is what underlies the Chazon Ish's Yesod. The Chazon Ish says that in the days of Tanaim Amoraim, there's a concept Meiser Rav. If I saw a Tanra Amora doing something, I could say, that's the halacha, because he did it, the deed of a Rebbe. But nowadays I can't say Meiser Rav anymore. Because now, when I say Meiser Rav, it could just be that the guy forgot the halacha. The guy didn't know the halacha. As great as he may be, it's possible that he's not on that level, in which every deed he does is meticulously reckoned and determined to be the true and proper thing to do at that time. Okay? So therefore, that leaves us in a bit of a quandary, a bit of a difficulty. How do we actually come to how do we actually decide what to do if we're confused about whom we can trust? It's not a simple thing, right? If we're not sure that so-and-so can understand our perspective, or not sure if so-and-so understands the entire situation, Have you go to so-and-so for advice and take that advice? So the simple answer is that you can't. You have to find somebody who has an expertise in your issue and deal with that person. Some people have expertise in many different areas. There's some Gedolei Torah who, in fact, know broad amounts of knowledge and have great insight. Those who know less and have less insight. So each person has to find another person to whom to turn, who they respect and know is knowledgeable or expert in the areas in which they want to ask ideas, suggestions, advice, direction, etc., etc. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So therefore, I personally would not put, if you went, let's say, I don't know who does this nowadays, but let's say, hypothetically, you went to Gadol X and said, Gadol X, should I have a medical situation A, B, C? Should I do Operation DEF or not do Operation DEF? So unless he knows you well, and unless he knows medicine well, it's a stupid thing to ask. Because he doesn't necessarily know anything more than anybody else. You have to make, if he's studied it, and he's conversant with this illness, so then you might be able to assume that his insight into illness is even greater than a doctor's insight. But if he hasn't studied it, then you're taking your life into your hands by going to this person. You can always ask him for a bracha, that's great. But don't rely on him to make the decision as to how to proceed with your medical treatment. There's a saying which is said, which Rashi brings out Chumash, which from Chazal. Yiftach b'daro k'shmuel b'daro. Yiftach, who was a very, so to speak, lightweight among the judges, his generation was like Shmuel in his generation. Shmuel was one of the heavyweights of the judges. So it does not be taken literally that they're equivalent. Yiftach in his generation to Shmuel in his generation. No, what it means is that in terms of a system of justice, you only have the system of justice in your generation. It might not be the ideal system of justice because this guy might not know as much as Shmuel, and he doesn't. And he might be much more frivolous and flippant than Shmuel. But that is the bottom line, that he is the judge, so therefore you have to go to him. So the same thing is true about all areas of life. In fact, other people from earlier generations might be much greater than the people who are alive today, and I'm sure they are greater. But the people who are alive today are they're who we have. So that's why we use them and their psukim and their advice in terms of trying to help ascertain what's supposed to be done under whatever situation we're given. The point of the chain of Masorah is that there are certain basics which don't change, but how these things are manifest and how the ramifications of them in every generation is very, very different than any other generation, and any place very, very different than any other place. And then besides that, just to make matters very confusing, there are various differences of opinion, which ultimately mean that every person has to choose a rabbi who they think has integrity, but is closest to their way of thinking, or the way of thinking they want to be close to. And this comes to mind because of something which I mentioned, but I haven't mentioned in a while, which is the Chazal from Maseches Sukkah says, if you live in Eretz Yisrael, you cannot say, you know what, I just want to learn Torah. I don't want to go work the land. I don't want to go to be a farmer. I just want to learn. So the Chazal says, can't do that. Because in Eretz Yisrael, there's a mitzvah to A, Basafko Nechot, to collect the grain, B, of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, to settle the land of Israel in a normal, proper manner. So he says, a person who Eretz Yisrael says he doesn't want to become a farmer is like a person who Chutz L'Eretz who says he doesn't want to put on tefillin. And a person who Chutz L'Eretz who says, I'm a big masmid, I can't put on tefillin. I'm to learning all day and all night. Still put on tefillin. So Chazal says the same thing about building up the land of Israel. He says maybe it's enough to be a blacksmith or any of the other trades which don't directly work with the earth. But you have to have a trade. So that's the Chazim Sofer. The Rav Chaim Volozher, and certainly many people who follow the Rav Chaim Volozher, say that no, it's preferable not to work at all and to learn all the time. And when it says, and many people did like Ushim by Yochai, and were not successful, Ushim by Yochai sat in a cave and learned for 7 years, it means that they were not able to withstand, they didn't have the capacity, the stamina to learn to be like Ushim by Yochai. But anybody who does should go into a cave. You should forget about this world. Right? Shmuel says, "Wasafti the ganecha." You should gather your grain. That's b'di'evet. If you can't separate yourself from this world, but it's preferable to go separate yourself from the world in order to go and learn Torah and not be involved in constructive activities in this world. So this becomes a very big difference of opinion. So you're going to pass on. You can't pass on something like this. There's no psak really in this. So you have to find one of these Rabbanim who's closest to your spirit and use him as your resource person, because the spirit you want to latch on to is that person's spirit. Any questions so far? This all clear? Questions? Nothing? Boy, I have to lecture. It's not fair. Okay, what?
I guess just about the earlier point about this ideas about someone who can be rescued through CPR or sociology. Just couldn't you say
sociology? Physiology?
No. Sorry. Someone who got divorced. Whether people want to get divorced sociologically or psychologically, whatever it was. So couldn't you say though that by CPR, that's something that you only need one occurrence where it works, and then you've quote-unquote uprooted that idea, whereas psychologically you might have thousands that disprove it, and for all you know there's
10,000 which prove it, right. That's also true. I don't know how to take a sampling.
Right.
Yeah. In Pikuach Nefesh, you don't need samplings.
Right.
You just need one case in which it works.
Right.
But you're right. In the other areas you need samples. That's very, I like that point because it supports my argument. So,
anytime.
But, yeah, I think it's correct. Okay, so getting back then to Emunas Chachamim, to belief in Chachamim. So, when we speak about Emunah Chachamim, it doesn't mean that we have to believe they're always right. It doesn't even mean that we have to always follow them. What it means is that you have to have Emunah in Chazal, because they conveyed Torah Shalom, they were very holy people. And you have to have Emunah that the Chacham in your generation, relative to you, not relative to Moshe Rabbeinu, not relative to the Rambam, not relative to Rav Moshe Feinstein, but relative to you, he has greater insight than you do. He is not going to be necessarily the greatest person in the world. He's not going to necessarily be correct at what he says, but he has superior insight to a person who doesn't learn, a person who hasn't learned. And that's why the Gra says a fascinating thing. I believe it's in Adam Shleimah. He says that if you have to make a decision about something and you have nobody to ask, nobody to consult, nobody to give you advice, so what you should do is sit down and learn 2 block Gemara. And after you learn those 2 block Gemara, then make that decision. So honestly, I don't know why it's 2 block, not 1 block. I'm not sure. But the point is that the Gemara in and of itself gives your mental processes a higher, holier, and more profound perspective. So that when you have to make the decision, you make the decision with a higher, holier, and more profound perspective. You can do that by going to a Rav sometimes. But if you ask the Rav, you can also do that yourself. Perhaps not as effectively, but it also can be accomplished in that manner. So,
but it's not that easy.
What?
It's not easy.
To do what?
To find a person that actually answers your question or knows about it.
Yeah, it's not so easy.
For example, medical situations.
Yes. It's not easy. It's often very difficult, yeah. But obviously in medical situation, even if you learn 2 block Gemara, if you had a doctor then don't assume that the two Gemara have given you special insight and you can decide now whether to operate or not. It would be better to flip a coin. Because at least then it's a 50-50 chance of being right. This way you have a 100% chance of being wrong.
I'll give you an example. My example. Vasectomy.
What?
Vasectomy.
Yeah.
I wanted to reverse it,
Yeah.
which I did.
Yeah.
But no one could answer the question if I should undergo the surgery.
No rabbi?
The rabbi didn't know the specifics. So we called up Anytime, and then we called up Bnei Olam, because the operation was going to be $25,000 in New York, because the medical insurance didn't cover, and it was going to be $7,000 in Boston. So I did it in Puerto Rico because it was $7,000, the same amount of money, and I didn't have to pay hotel or anything like that. But the point is that the Torah says anyone that crushes, cuts, damages, whatever, cannot join the congregation of Hashem.
Right.
So basically, it says that the person in that condition has to marry a Geyoris.
Right.
Okay, fine. So that's one of the reasons why I did it. Then, once it was finished and complete, then how to test it if it's working. So I have to call up Rabbi Tendler, Tendler's uncle, because my Hasidic mashpia in Williamsburg, he could not conceive in his mind how could someone recommend to use a device that will stimulate the ejaculation.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not easy. It's not an easy
It's not easy to find somebody
situation.
in such a situation.
And it's the same situation with couples that cannot have children or some other problems.
Right. So that's why issues like these really have to be decided by great poskim who do have knowledge, such as you mentioned, Rabbi Tendler, who has a degree in biology. So people who do have knowledge of the situation and the parameters and all the things which go into it. Right. And I have a friend. In Toronto he's not a doctor, but he's a very smart fellow, and he's read up a lot on cancer patients, on cancer and cancer patients, cancer treatments. And he actually, to the point where his advice is sought as to how people should treat cancer. So he once said to me, he said, I know a case in which somebody went to Reb Chaim Kanievsky. And this fellow should have had surgery. He should have had whatever was a bone marrow transplant. And he went to Reb Chaim, and Reb Chaim told him not to have a bone marrow transplant. And he died. So Reb Chaim was obviously incorrect about that, right? Because he died, and my friend said it was clear that the bone marrow transplant was the way to go with that one. So I think they say the story about. I heard the story about Chaim Kanievsky specifically, but it's true about I'm sure anybody that you should not go to a gadol in our day and age and ask him whether to have an operation or not, unless that person is an expert in the area which you're asking. Some people perhaps will get the expertise very quickly, but the odds are most people are too busy to do that. You have to find somebody who's an expert. That's one thing. Now another thing, which is we're getting back to the topic from a few moments ago, is that, as I said, you have to know who to ask. You want to ask a question?
Yeah, why can't you ask someone like that? Maybe you were meant to go not do it. Maybe you had some Ruach HaKodesh.
No, Reb Kanievsky said this was the way he would live. No, you can't assume anybody's Ruach HaKodesh in our day and age. I'm not saying they don't, but you can't assume that they do.
What about asking someone with Das Torah? We value their opinions, don't we?
We do, but we value their opinions much more if they know a lot about what they're giving advice. Now, I'm going to give you another example. Okay? The other example is when I was living in Eretz Yisrael when I was 19 and I didn't want to come back to America. You know, my parents wanted me to come back to America to college. So the question was who I should go ask the question to. So it was clear that I should not go ask the Sleipler. I'm Kanievsky's father. Because he would automatically say no. You shouldn't go back. Rather, I should ask either Rav Elyashiv or Rav Shlomo Zalman. Because Rav Elyashiv or Rav Shlomo Zalman, they would not automatically say no. They would consider the issues involved. As it was, I asked Rav Shlomo Zalman, and he said to go back, whatever the case was, he said to go back to go to college. So the point is that a person cannot assume that there is an objective perspective which is the right one, which he's going to get by asking any great person, and were he to go to anybody else, he would get the same answer. There's Sims used to have this motto, maybe they still do. An educated consumer is our best customer. You have to have a sense of who is engaged with your derech and understands where you're coming from. And not as somebody who is not part of your derech, and not part of where you're coming from. So therefore, if you have a buffer in a yeshiva like Or Samech, who wants to go ask dating advice from the Vision to Rebbe of Muncie, that's a very bad idea. Because the Vision to Rebbe of Muncie inhabits a completely different world than the buffer in Or Samech. So therefore, the advice he's going to get is not going to be appropriate for him. Now, I don't know, Vision to Rebbe might not give him advice. It's also possible. But the advice he gets usually will not be the type of advice which is going to be useful and might even be harmful for the person. In reality, what this means is that we say that you're supposed to listen to Gdolei Torah, which is true, but you do. Everybody in some way, shape, or form picks their Gadol B'Torah. You might not even consciously realize it, but by choosing to, as since Gedolim are not a monolithic, unified body, and they don't all say the same thing, and they don't all have the same perspective, so therefore, in essence, you are making the choice yourself to a certain extent. And then, this Gadol is either confirming it or passively rejecting it, but on a very different scale than if you would just go to the first random Gadol you happen to see. It makes a big difference. So when the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, "Asei l'cha Rav," make for yourself a Rebbe, it means that. It doesn't say that go to the first Rav you find, or have all the Rabbanim which you can possibly get. It means you have to make a person into your Rav, somebody with whom you have not just a feeling of respect or reverence or an awe of, but somebody with whom you have a connection spiritually, psychologically, in a way which makes sense for this person to be the person to whom to direct your shilos. That all is stated about the Gdolim in our generation. They say, again, Yiftach B'doro Kashmu B'doro, we mean that whoever you choose, that person you should become your Mora Derech, because obviously he's going along the Derech that you've chosen for yourself. But when it comes to Chazal, we don't differentiate. That's an interesting thing. And we shine him also. Until the later Afchanim, we don't differentiate and say, well, this Chazal had this Derech, and that Chazal had that Derech, and this Derech appeals to me, and that Derech doesn't appeal to me. That's the unique quality of Chazal and also most Rishonim, which is that we regard everything they said as possibly relevant to everybody. And again, I think that it has to do with their Ruach HaKodesh, with the fact that we're dealing with people who spoke to Eliyahu Navi, who spoke to the Malach HaMoles, who were Mechayim Mesim, who did all these things, who davened and were answered. They did all these things. So therefore, they were in a unique situation, and they represent not specific approaches, but sources to derive any approach. But that's something which doesn't exist in our later generations. It can't exist in our later generations. Still no questions?
Do we have to switch? Like go to one rabbi and then
Yes.
not take his advice and go to the next like
Yes, but you
other
have
rabbi?
to, you're supposed to tell the second rabbi. They already asked the first rabbi.
And what he said?
What?
And what he said?
Yes. Well, if the second rabbi asked you, the second rabbi might not ask you. But if you came to me and you told me I already asked Rabbi so-and-so, I might just say, well, I don't care if you ask Rabbi so-and-so, you're asking me, this is my answer. I might say, what did Rabbi so-and-so tell you? And then I might still say, well, he was wrong. But I might say, what did Rabbi so-and-so tell you? And then you would say, well, he told me X, Y, Z. I would say, listen, he paskined. That actually happened to me in the story, to a certain extent. After I went to Shlomo Zalman. So I was not supposed to go to Rabbi Yoshi myself. One of the Rabbanim who now is very close to Rabbi Yoshi, his name is Rabbi Efrati, still there. He was going to ask Rabbi Yoshi for me, what Rabbi Yoshi's opinion was. So after I got the answer from Shlomo Zalman, I asked Rabbi Efrati, so what did Rabbi Yoshi say? He refused to answer me. He wouldn't tell me what Rabbi Yoshi said. He said, for you it's not relevant. You went to Shlomo Zalman. Shlomo Zalman gave you an answer. You don't have to know what Rabbi Yoshi said. So I always suspect, of course, that Rabbi Yoshi said, stay in Israel. I have no way of knowing that because he didn't tell me. So that the second Rav has the prerogative to decide how to deal with what you already heard. But he should be, for that to happen, he should be advised that this took place. But you're allowed to switch rabbis, you're allowed to switch rabbis, you're allowed to switch drachim. The question is how much you have to change when you switch a derech. In other words, a Belzer Chassid, let's say, wants to become a Satmar Chassid. So, we don't say just because you're born a Belzer, you're stuck. Right? You can never become a Satmar Chassid. You want to become a Satmar Chassid, you can go ahead. But you probably should get some information first about what it means to be a Satmar Chassid. And talk it over, because it's a very different lifestyle than you had as a Belzer. Right? So, it's sometimes people say, I've heard people say that the reason why one should believe in Hashem is because you were born Jewish. If you're born Jewish, then you should believe in Hashem. If you're not born Jewish, so then you believe in something else, right? I don't think that's correct. I think it's totally distorted. I think that everybody in the world, were they to view the situation rationally and dispassionately, they'll come to the conclusion that Emunah in Hashem is where it's at. And either keep the entire mitzvahs, 30 mitzvahs, keep 7 mitzvahs, whatever the case may be. But it has to be that you are able to think things over independently, no matter who you are and where you find yourself. Otherwise, there could never be an obligation on non-Jews to keep the Shem mitzvahs b'nei Noach, unless they were born with them. We know that's not true. There isn't an obligation for them to keep the Shem mitzvahs b'nei Noach, even though they weren't born with them. That's like somebody would say to me, it's happened to me, people will say, I speak to, every 6 months we have the Lubavitch Shir in Or Sameach. Well, every 6 months I give a Shir on Lubavitch. That's the cycle. So so people ask me sometimes, they say, I'm sorry, so Lubavitcher sometimes criticize me. And they say, you can't know what it means to be Lubavitcher unless you're Lubavitcher. That's false. Because in that case, how can I know what it means to be a Catholic until I practice Catholicism? How can I know what it means to be Muslim until I practice Islam? But rather, Hashem gave us intellect in order to understand things, even without being them. Just by examining the data, the evidence, the material, you should be able to come to a conclusion. So, it's not that it's not that the way you find out about something is always by experiencing it. The way you find out about something is usually by thinking about it. Yeah.
What is your conclusion
About what?
about your findings?
Oh, Beckhofferism.
Okay.
Sure. That's the only way to go. Trust me on that one. So, what I conclude is not necessarily valid for you. Right?
Can you switch between Ashkenazi and Sephardi?
Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, Rav Yosef will make you a conversion ceremony.
Really?
Yes. He has a conversion ceremony for converting from Ashkenaz to Sephardi.
Slaps.
Right? Well, I don't know if that's necessary. Probably that's a hitter mitzvah if he slaps you.
Can you like reconvert? Or
What?
can you reconvert?
What it is you accept certain things upon yourself. You would nullify certain practices you had till now.
Like what?
What?
Like what?
Davening Ashkenaz.
Not eating kidneys on Pesach?
You nullify that? You just it's like a non-action.
What? Yes, but I deliberately refrain from it. Okay. So there are a bunch of things like that. So therefore, so he actually arranged. I've never heard of anybody arranging a ceremony the other direction. But
Hope you find some maybe.
yeah, the conversion to Ashkenaz ceremony. But there is a conversion to Sephardi ceremony. So as I mentioned many times here, that the advantage of being a Baal Tshuva is that you can pick and choose. If you're already from, so it's not so simple to pick and choose, because you might be stuck by your forefathers' acceptance of a certain set of standards. You can jump ship and join another group of Judaism, but within the group in which you're affiliated, you might be stuck by abiding by their specific customs. But if you're a ger, you can pick and choose from off the shelf whatever customs you do or do not want. Make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Boy, people are so quiet tonight. Okay, so then we have about 5 more minutes, and let's
Sit
think.
and look at the wall.
What?
Sit and look in the wall. I have a question though. According to like a Pesach, doesn't it stand to reason that a Pesach will look into the medical nature of things and then give you a psak halacha? For instance, you ask a psak halacha about whatever it's going to be, taking medicine.
Yes, well, Hanukkah is not opposed.
Oh, okay, fine. I'm just talking about if you're asking for a psak halacha.
Yeah, of course.
Meaning, can't you go to someone?
The great poskim will have looked into medical technology and medical, of course, into medicine.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. People like Roshom Zamreibach, Rav Elyashiv, Tzitz Eliezer, Moshe Feinstein, they obviously they won't pass it unless they have some knowledge of that which they're possibly considering.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what, as far as what makes them great poskim is the comprehensive research, right? So unfortunately there are people who are, either not poskim for whatever reason, or are poskim but are too busy, poskim are too busy to research a topic thoroughly, and then you can get into hot water. But I want to tell you, the only reason I understand how a refrigerator works is because Shlomo Zalman explains at the beginning of his tshuva on refrigerators on Shabbos how refrigerators work. Otherwise, I have no clue how a refrigerator works. So everything, Shlomo Zalman had an amazing grasp of technology, so much so that he could translate it for dummies like me. So that is an important advocacy factor of being a great person. Other people didn't have to know that. Let's say, Rav Shach, he didn't have to know anything about the technology of refrigerators. He wasn't asked to pass kind of refrigerators.
Right.
So it all depends. If you're a posek, yes, a posek who's significant and worthwhile will have made his point to find out about those things.
Can I ask a complete side question?
Absolutely.
Is there any from Judaism studying philosophy? Jewish philosophy?
In theory or in practice? In theory, there is no problem. Rambam studied philosophy. In practice, what's up? One of Reb Aaron Soloveitchik's sons. Reb Aaron Soloveitchik was a very distinguished Talmid Chacham who lived in Chicago. Told me that he once went to his father, to discuss what he was going to study in college. So his father said, so he said his father, he wants to study philosophy. The son said he wants to study philosophy. Father said, no, you shouldn't study philosophy. So the son said, wait a minute, but what about my uncle? Rabban Soloveitchik's older brother, Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, Rabbi Yosef Ber, who's known as the Rav, who was the Rosh Yeshiva in Shiva University, who had studied philosophy, written many books about philosophy. So if he could do, why can't I do it? So the father, Rabban Soloveitchik, said, he could make a contribution, you won't make a contribution. in other words, yes, in theory you can study philosophy. The question is whether it's good for you to study philosophy. In other words, are you going to get so messed up and confused that it's just going to be ultimately a negative and not a positive? And so, besides that, it's not that it's usher, but the question is what the returns are. Besides that, especially ancient Greek philosophy, I mentioned this before, I tried listening to Aristotle on books on tape while driving. It was Sakonos Tefashos, because I was falling asleep all the time at the wheel. So, these things, Aristotle is extraordinarily boring. So, Plato, I think, is more interesting. But in any event, so therefore a person has to know that philosophy is not necessarily going to be, it's not necessarily going to be appropriate for everybody, and it also is not particularly interesting for everybody. But if you feel very strongly about it, it's fine.
Is something like Rabbi Akiva, somebody says, like one of these people never get out of him, or will study...
Chachma Yavanis, but according to the Bible, Chachma Yavanis is a specific type of language, not philosophy in general. It's like the Greek, a special, when one uses Chachma Yavanis, it says, you should not learn Chachma Yavanis. It doesn't mean Greek wisdom in the sense of philosophy. It means a certain Greek code language which was used by the enemies of the Jews to the Greeks and the Chashmonaim were outside the city of Yerushalayim to conquer Yerushalayim at some point in history. So therefore,
nothing to do with ideology,
not
principle.
not necessarily anything to do with philosophy. Yeah. The Maharshal, Shlomo Luria, he criticized his cousin, the Moshe Isserlis, the Ramah, for learning philosophy. He said, why are you wasting time learning philosophy? So Ramah said, don't worry, I only study philosophy on Shabbos, when everybody else is taking their Shabbos strolls. So me, instead of taking a Shabbos stroll, I quickly get in some philosophical studies. But, so I'm not wasting any time while doing it. But, so I think there was also a question more of time than of the actual material.
All right. How could we contact Posek?
How can you contact Posek?
Posek.com.
I'll give you an idea. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
You know Eloi Hasidim? Is the descendants of the Khatam Sofer. They have
Eloi, yeah.
Yes, they're Ashkenazim, but
Yeah.
with inclinations to Hasidism. So in order to find a shul that they have in Border Park, you know what I have to do? Because they're not in the internet. No telephone, no directories, no nothing. So I have to put an announcement in the Luach, and someone answered. It's like, sending a letter by buggy.
There's certain people you can call. First of all, Reb David Cohen in Brooklyn, and these people have hours during which you can call. I used to have his phone number and his hours. I lost them. There's Reb Shlomo Miller in Toronto. There's Reb Herschel Schechter in YU. There's Reb Yisrael Belsky in Brooklyn. There's a whole list of people I could give you. Nowadays, people don't write anything anymore. Used to be people used to write questions, and they would get answers in writing. Those are the good old days. Now you make phone calls.
Or emails.
They don't use email, most of these people.
Well, they still have Shallow Chuba savers?
No, nobody's putting them out anymore.
Oh, no.
That's been a very big tragedy. Yeah.
Actually, it's bad. So much to do.
Yes, they should. Yeah.
Sarah recording phone calls.
Yeah. That's right.
Transcribe phone calls.
Yeah.
It's calling to record it.
First safer Torah.
No, it's going next year it's going to be very hard from now, because everything now is done by verbally. It's very, very bad for
Right.
the done with the halacha.
Sure.
Yeah, there's nothing to do about it though. That's the way it is.
Back in the time of the Mishnah and Gemara.
Right. So eventually somebody will start writing things down again, but these things don't cycle. Sooner or later, well, if somebody will figure out, hey, what's man Jewish thing? So it'll take some time to get there. All right, my side. Enjoy your winter vacation.
See you around.
We'll see you on Hashem next Wednesday. Suggestions for topics? If you have any topic that wants to be addressed.
That's not.